Howdy folks, welcome to DevOps Diaries. A quick, exciting announcement from me before we get started and stuck into the episode. Earlier this week, it was announced that Gearset has acquired Clayton. Clayton is the most effective code analysis platform for Salesforce and incorporates a hugely important part of the DevOps lifecycle. Clayton is a developer-first solution that catches, blocks, and automatically fixes bad code in your Salesforce lifecycle. Clayton will help you build more secure, well-architected Salesforce applications and is a key part to making you and your Salesforce users effective. Really excited to bring the Clayton team on board. Everybody at Gearset is super stoked. And to tell you more about it, Kevin Boyle, the CEO of Gearset, and Lorenzo Frattini, the CEO of Clayton, are going to be joining me for a fireside chat on LinkedIn Live on the 25th of September. I hope you can join us. The event details are on Gearset's LinkedIn page if you go and search for them, but it's going to be a really great chat and you can find out what that is going to mean for the Salesforce community and all the amazing people building on Salesforce, bringing you one of the best in class, two of the best in class solutions available for the platform in that lifecycle. Really excited to host that chat with Kevin and Lorenzo. Hope to see you there 25th of September. Now back to the episode. Hey Andy, welcome to the DevOps Diaries podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me, Jack.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. Of course it is. Of course it is. And Andy, I'm very excited to talk to you today about flows and your Salesforce journey. And so I don't ruin it for the listeners. Tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are and what it is that you focus on.
Yeah, my name is Andy Engin Utkan, and I'm an industrial engineer with a master's in engineering management. I've done several roles in my corporate life, and I got involved in CRM implementations. About 10 years ago, I implemented Salesforce for my own team in Turkey. And when I moved to the United States in 2018, I decided to focus my career on Salesforce. And, I started learning Salesforce, picking up certifications. And along the way, I found out that I love flows. So I teach flows, I build flows. I'm the founder of VRD Pro Consulting, a content platform called Salesforce Break, and Flow Canvas Academy. So, I share my knowledge and I also teach flows to the community on several platforms. And I was named Salesforce MVP about 2 years ago, and I love doing it. Thank you very much for having me today.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you on MVP, and thank you for all you do for the community. You mentioned some of the work that you do there. Salesforce Break, you got nearly 4,000 subscribers on Instagram, where you post a range of videos, material to help people learn flows, and obviously Salesforce Break newsletter. Tell me a little bit about how that came about.
Well, I started sharing videos on YouTube I think it was about 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I'm having a hard time remembering, but the idea originally was I was going to try and teach people flow in shorter videos, shorter than 10 minutes, right, in duration. But then I quickly found out that actually is not very possible in the style that I teach, tutorial-based style, showing everybody all the steps that I go through, right? And that's how the name came about, like you can actually learn Salesforce flows in your kind of break, 10-minute break kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And after the YouTube video, I registered the domain salesforcebreak.com and I started putting all my blog content also on that platform. So now I have the blog, I have the YouTube channel, and I have several other things kind of merging into the same thing.
Yeah, no, it's amazing content. And if any of the listeners there aren't familiar with Salesforce Break and the Salesforce Break content, go follow and subscribe to Andy's platforms. They really are awesome. But flows, you mentioned that you fell in love with flows and flows is your thing. What is it about flows that you like so much and what you can do with them?
Well, I mean, I started programming early on as a kid. I was playing with programming, very basic, obviously, at a very basic level. And I've done some programming just for fun. as I was studying at the university and get my master's. But when I started focusing my career on Salesforce again, I quickly discovered I love the visual programming. I think there are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, I love kind of breaking and fixing things. I also tie my kind of brand to that a little bit. And that allows me, the platform allows me to do that. I'm a very visual person. I like pictures, diagrams, and I like putting things into places and, trying different variations and see whether things fit well with each other. And I also love trying to simplify things for other people, complicated technical concepts for other people so they can learn those better. The motto for the platform is Salesforce Made Easy. And I always try to spin my content for the admin audience. I also teach developers and more technical people, but for me, it's extremely important that it is simple enough so that a non-technical person also can pick it up like in a fast and easy fashion. So I think all those things combined, I started loving flows. And, when I started focusing learning and teaching flows, Salesforce decided they are going to retire everything else, and they started rapidly developing the functionality on Salesforce Flow, and that kind of accelerated also my path in this area and kind of put me in the forefront of the content creators, which was my luck, I guess.
Yeah, I really resonate with that content, the technical content geared towards admins, but also relevant for developers. That comes up quite a lot in the DevOps conversations that we have. DevOps can be a technical topic, and making content that admins can understand and make it easy to implement, things that are traditionally unfamiliar for a typical admin audience versus a developer audience can come with its challenges. I want to come back to that. So in just a moment, is there, I want to talk about flows and a little bit of history from your perspective. So, or those that are unfamiliar with flows and why they're important and what they're used for. Salesforce newbies, I guess. What are Salesforce flows and why are they important and how are they used in business contexts?
Yeah, very well. Let's start with that. I mean, Salesforce Flows are low-code automation tools, right? It's a platform where you can automate your business processes, and people use code to do that, but you don't really have to use code. And for many of the use cases, you can also leverage the low-code platform and do the kind of the visual programming, doing the drag and drop programming on this platform that Salesforce provides us. A little history about Salesforce Flow. Salesforce Flow is a tool that Salesforce acquired back in the day, and it was originally geared toward building scripts and automations for the call center agent or the front-facing staff. They could be salespeople, for example, and it allowed them to collect information from the customers and also read information that was provided to them by the system. It didn't really have any record-triggered or auto-launch kind of capabilities. On Salesforce, we had other tools doing that along the way, like workflow rules, process builder, and so on. But at some point, Salesforce decided to leverage the Flow platform to offer all those automations and started merging all the capabilities under this Flow platform. We received the record-triggered flows, auto-launch flows, schedule-triggered flows, and all kinds of other flow types. And when we look at what we have today, Salesforce is accelerating the development of more technical capabilities even on the Flow platform. Now, you can trigger MuleSoft actions. MuleSoft can trigger Flow actions. The new Marketing Cloud Growth Edition leverages flows for journey builder type of stuff. Data Cloud can integrate with flow actions and that kind of stuff. We have the orchestrator tool that allows us to stitch flows together to come up with like more sophisticated flows that we can use to bounce things around in our large organization. We can actually send actions to different departments, different users, and we can time and schedule them a little bit better. We can automate things that can run in parallel, right? So it seems like there is not really an end to it. So it keeps expanding in scope with every release. And there lies also the dilemma. And we have seen, for example, in the last period or so, there are many supporters and lovers of Salesforce Flow. At the same time, there are also some people who are quite concerned about the development because the developers do prefer, obviously, development through coding. And they do like the fact that there is actually a systematic that goes with development, the testing and deployment and the release concept. On the Flow side, we don't really require the Flow builders to do their testing. There is no required test coverage that goes with that. The Flow developers are not really banned from building things in production, although we strictly recommend against that. So those are the things that actually make some of the developers and some of the people around the ecosystem more concerned about the high speed of growth for the Flow tool or high speed of adoption for the Flow tool.
That makes sense. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, between working with the admins that are new to Flows and very used to working in that declarative manner versus a developer who's used to writing in code and following that software development lifecycle more familiar, that developers are typically more familiar with. How do you get a developer excited about Flows? And what do you think about how prevalent will Flows be versus Apex, or taking over the tasks that Apex typically would handle in a historic context?
Well, that's an excellent question, Jack. Let me share with you my observation about kind of the reactions that I get from developers and admins as I teach them Flows, or as I share some of the capabilities of the platform with them. Now, the admins, they are very excited about automating on the platform. They actually want to do more, right? They want to empower and enable their users. So for them, the challenge mostly is understanding the capabilities and being able to apply them, right? So, and they come usually at you with user stories and use cases that are rooted in business processes. They will talk in business terms or user terms. They will say, okay, I have a user who wants to be able to create this record when this record is updated, and so on. When you're talking to developers usually talk to you about use cases. And when they define their use cases, they don't really talk in business terms most of the time. They will tell you how they do things in Apex, and they will try and do the same exact process in the Flow builder. While not everything is possible, for example, to do it in the Flow canvas, first of all, right? There is not a parity of functionality between Apex and Flows. But even when you're able to do things, you generally don't do them exactly the same way. In the code builder, you do it differently when you compare what you do in the Flow canvas. And that's actually a challenge because, what we would like to do as educators, teachers, or, the let's say evangelists and supporters of the Flow platform is we would like for the users or the learners to come at us with a business problem, with a business process, so that we can help them automate in the best way. Now, we actually want the developers to get excited about Flows. And the reason for that being is when you have a business requirement that needs to change throughout time, and most of them do change throughout time, the timeline, and some of them have to change quite a bit. Like every quarter, maybe you have to update some business process. You have to update parameters in that business process, and then that automation is going to do something different. That could be every month. That could be every week. Now, my question to the developers would be, if you write everything in Apex, are you interested in going back and updating all those mundane parameters yourself, right? If you're like an in-house resource. And many organizations don't really have in-house developers anyway. So in those cases, those business processes don't get updated, or these organizations have to go out and hire new people, contract new developers, and that's a process that takes time. And then you see situations where the business process and the automation don't match each other, and things don't get used properly. They could be turned off and that kind of stuff. If you marry the code and, let's say, an auto launch flow together, so you have Apex triggers, your Apex class, calling, in some cases, your auto launch flows, those flows can be easily updated by the admin, which means the developer doesn't have to get involved. They don't have to worry about those mundane tasks of updating parameters. I mean, like mundane tasks for them. For the admin, those are important tasks. And things get updated properly and everything is kept in sync, right? Mm-hmm. And if you flip the script, if you actually do it the other way around, you can have the admin developing triggers and flows and that kind of stuff in the flow canvas. And there are just some things that are simply done better in Apex. Like, Stockwell is much more powerful in Apex. You can get your records much more efficiently, much better. Collection operations are much better in Apex. Some integration actions are better on the code side. They are being rapidly developed on the flow side, but they are still better on the code side. So you can empower your admins by creating invocable Apex. And in those cases, those invocable Apex can be called and repeated from several flows so that the admins can be empowered to finish some tasks that they can't usually do. And if you marry these things together efficiently, you are going to find that your organization works much better, and it is going to be easily maintained and up to date over a long period of time.
Yeah, such a interesting point about collaboration and making sure that everybody across the team is working on things that drive automation and the value of the Salesforce platform and cohesively, thinking about that empowerment from a developer perspective. If I build something that can be built in conjunction with an admin, then we're going to take a lot of, business as usual tasks, I guess, out of their hands so they can build the things and carry on making enhancements to the platform that they might not have had time to previously because of typical amounts of rework that might have happened. You mentioned updating parameters as an example there. So that's a really interesting point about collaboration to get the most out of the platform. When it comes to flows, I've often heard about how much resource of the Salesforce platform is required to run flows versus Apex. Is there anything there where there is considerations where we should do this in Apex instead of Flow, or we should carry on using Flow? Because the message that we get from Salesforce these days is typically you can do that in Flow. Flow should be used for most of your automation and your business processes. Where do you think the trade-off is there when it comes to platform scalability?
Yeah, I mean, when you go to the architect.salesforce.com, which is a wonderful resource for these discussions, because these are essentially architectural discussions, when to use which tool, right? And how do you decide that? So on that website and the platform, there's a record triggered automation architectural recommendation post that talks about when to use what. And obviously, performance is one of those considerations. And if you look at the benchmarks are published there. You'll quickly see that the before save flows perform almost as fast, not as fast, but almost as fast as Apex, right? If you can do your updates in a before save flow, that's almost as fast as code. If you do your after save record triggered automation on the flow side, that's going to be slower than Apex. So if performance is an issue or consideration, then you may consider going to the Apex side. But what I have found in my experience, I have dealt with organizations that had Apex triggers, flow triggers, roll-up summaries, managed and unmanaged packages. what I have found is there is so much opportunities in terms of performance when you look at how things are structured, both on the code side and low code side. Usually, the tool itself is not a major issue. I mean, there are so many triggers out there, both on the code and low code side, that can be optimized and perform faster. Usually, the decision to go from low code to code is not really the most important thing that's out there that you should be considering.
Interesting. Yeah. So let's talk about some of the challenges as it relates to flows. So you've mentioned previously in this conversation about flows typically are maybe more challenging in the typical software development lifecycle that we experience. So updating and seeing changes from flow versions between sandboxes is typically one of those challenges that we see. And deploying flows to production is something that we hear as often being challenging. For you, what are some of the things that you see when you're teaching your students that they also find as the bigger hurdles when it comes to implementing flows and getting all that beautiful work out into end users' hands?
Yes, definitely. I mean, like I said, I always try to look at things from an admin viewpoint, but at the same time, I try and understand what are the adoption hurdles for Flow, also from the developer or architect side. And recently, when I was doing my sessions, I've been to a couple of European sessions this year, and I have presented about flows in Berlin and in London. And I have found, for example, on the European side, many developers are not a fan of flows, right? And as I was trying to understand the reasoning for that, in between Berlin and London, I was in Atlanta doing Southeast streaming, and I was at a session by John and Daniel, who does large-scale implementations, usually for government clients, and he was talking about how he was running a very strict CI/CD discipline, and that flows are very challenging for him because when he's dealing with code, it's very easy for him to do and redo his testing, right? When he's doing like isolated development in a Scratch org, he can easily test and retest the code, but that's usually not the case with flows. The other thing that's challenging for him is to try and understand the differences between two flows, right? Between two versions, let's say. So as you go through your development and improve your flow design, if you put two things side by side, it's not really easy for you to tell what changed when you can easily do that, like, in code, right? So those are the challenges that people face out there. And Salesforce gave us a testing tool for Flow in one of the earlier releases, but then the focus changed and the development stopped. It's not really 100% ready. And we don't really have a good way of comparing different versions of Flow. But as I was in London, Gearset actually presented their solution that simplifies that process. Now, as far as I know, in Gearset now, in the new version, in the new capability, you can look at the flow design. You can view it in your Gearset UI, and you are going to be easily tell what changed and what didn't change. That's definitely a good step, a right step in the right direction.
Yeah, no, we're very excited about that functionality, and it's certainly proved useful to see that schema in ways that admins are familiar with understanding, and they can see the changes or additions or removals of components of flows and how they work. And we talk about this this bit of tension, I guess, between developers and admins, and a lot of developers are familiar with scripted CI/CD processes and using Git via the command line and those things, where admins typically don't have that exposure and that knowledge. And it's, I think, with something like Flows and that declarative mindset, and a tool like Gearset, which is also declarative rather than relying on command line interactions, it's understanding actually the benefits of that tool at the time, and what it's needed for, and like isolating some or removing some of that pain of identifying those issues. I guess if a flow is still going to be a block of XML, but it's going to be really hard to understand a flow in a block of XML compared to that visualization that we're used to seeing in those drag and drop screens. And then when it comes to that testing, that repeated ability to test something in a flow versus Apex again, for example, I certainly see those challenges. Would you like to see Salesforce invest more in testing capabilities for flows? And do you think that's a necessary next step to see that wider adoption and get to that utopia where admins and developers can work together in that harmony that you've already suggested?
Definitely. I mean, one of the biggest challenges that new flow learners have is being able to read the debug log very well, right? I have been doing this quite some time, so I can read the debug log very well. I have the experience to be able to identify what's kind of failing there. I can read the values in the log. I can interpret some of the fault messages and, the Apex governor limit violations and that kind of stuff. But for new starters, it's very hard to read that stuff, right? So, and along the new versions, as we go along the new versions, Salesforce gave us additional capabilities and help text and details in those logs that can be leveraged by the new learners. But we still don't have the capability to set up sophisticated testing that can be saved and repeated, in our process. That Salesforce Flow testing capability that was released, I think about 2 years ago now, that needs to be developed. And if we can develop that and if we can make that much more powerful, that's going to help with this, let's say, friction of securing higher flow adoption in the ecosystem. But we are at an interesting times as well, because the way the tool is being developed by Salesforce teams now, it seems like there are multiple different focus areas that they are running to. Now, on the one hand, we have the AI-powered teams enabling the flow builders to build flows from AI prompts, right? That is coming. So it's going to be in open beta soon. I am actually one of the volunteers who worked with the product team to try to get this off the ground. We still have some ways to go for that to be powerful enough for people to use, kind of, in large scale. But still, we are empowering, let's say, the less skilled or, like early adopters. We are empowering the early adopters or less technical people to build flows. So we're going to get more flows in our organization. Possibly they will have some issues inherited in the design, because we still have to, as technical people, we still have to review what comes out of the AI LLM tools, because there are some issues that come with that, hallucinations and potential problems with the design. So one of the personas that we're dealing with is the citizen developer or the power user, however you want to frame that. So, that's one persona that we didn't deal with before. We dealt with admins, and I would argue we're not even talking about a standard admin when we're talking about the flow builder. It's actually the first step of development, right? And then Salesforce is also constantly building highly technical capabilities into flow. So we have now the transform element that can transform collections, right, without looping. We have the HTTP callout. We have new integration capabilities coming into the flow builder. And we are receiving constantly updates that actually is attempting to integrate all the different clouds that are not together in the same core, right? Like the integration capabilities. Now, this cloud can trigger a flow inside our Salesforce org. Our Salesforce org can update the data model or the data for this other cloud. So, and that part is highly technical. So over there, we are actually potentially dealing with developer admin, kind of admin developer personality, and also the developers. If they find that faster, easier to maintain, maybe instead of doing that via code, at some point they are going to prefer doing it using Flow. So, and that sometimes creates also like tensions and pitfalls in the design as well, because on the one hand, we're trying to make the UI much easier, and on the other hand, we are piling so much stuff onto the platform that it inherently becomes more complicated, right?
Yeah. That's when I think user experience is one of those things that we talk about in Salesforce a lot. How are our users going to interact with the platform? And I think one of the things that's come out of this conversation for me as a takeaway is the user experience of Flows is going to continue to be highly important in not only its adoption, but also its usability, especially when we start incorporating AI into generating flows for us and that methodology. Do you think, in terms of like, if we look forward a little bit, we see in some other areas of the platform, so take CPQ, for example, you very much have specialists in CPQ, and CPQ is kind of all they do, whether they're CPQ consultants or what have you. Do you think flows will go that direction on the platform, where people will become flow specialists and that will become a core tenet of a Salesforce team, where you have a specialist in that area? Or do you think this is going to be a more broadly adopted and implemented skill set across every admin or admin developer, if you like?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm kind of biased, right, in that area. I think Flow is already Flow is already like a special area that needs to be adopted by certain specialists. Like, I first of all, I believe in um, uh, specialty areas, right? Like I don't think we can be experts in everything, and we have seen that in the last few years where Salesforce acquired and adopted all kinds of different cloud solutions, and the platform is getting bigger and bigger every day. And it's impossible now to say, and I don't think it was ever possible, but lately it's been impossible to say I'm an expert in Salesforce, right?
Mm.
And I present and share my knowledge quite a bit. I do community group meetings. I'm right now in North Carolina. I'm going to do the Charlotte admin group meeting, for example, on Friday. I do presentations at Dreamforce, at Dreaming events. And sometimes I get the question, they're like, well, you always tell us about flows. Would you like to present on something else? And I say, no, I mean, I do flows because I'm the flow expert, and I like to stay that way. And just trying to stay up to date with the capabilities on flow is a full-time job for me. So we have seen in the market that people are automatically assuming that the admins should be flow experts, right? I don't think that take is right. That take is not correct, because when you're talking about the capability of building flows, you're talking about looping, you're talking about understanding of variables, collections, and lately we're talking about transform element and integrations, HTTP callouts, and that kind of stuff. These are programming concepts. And for somebody to be able to understand these, they have to skill up. It's not an admin skill. So for somebody to put like a post like on LinkedIn or some career platform and say like, I'm looking for an admin and they need to be able to do all these flows and I'm paying an admin salary, that's not fair, right? We see this all the time. So I definitely think it's a separate skill. Now we have seen Salesforce build up trailhead content on flows. Now we have a lot of modules and super badges. We didn't have that before. That's a very, very welcome change. We have people like me in the ecosystem who have their own training classes, and now Salesforce is offering their own training class teaching flows. They didn't have that. Like a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, they didn't have that. So those are good signs. I think we should have also a flow certification, and then we should also recognize and kind of solidify that this is actually a separate skill that needs to be acquired, kind of like Platform Developer 1 before Platform Developer 1. We have the App Builder certificate that really requires an update. Now it's kind of out of date. It used to have workflow rules and process builder things in there. It does have some stuff related to Lightning apps and configuration. But now Flows have taken the flag, and then they've gone to some other place, and the capability has expanded. Now we really need a separate curriculum, separate certification, and we really need to have Flow experts in the ecosystem doing this, because this is the challenge I see in the ecosystem going forward. We have the AI building flows right now. The AI is going to give you the first draft of your flows. We have many beginners building flows. We have admins building flows. We have developers building flows. And when you throw all these things together with the Apex triggers and DLRS, the roll-up summaries, managed and unmanaged packages in the orgs, we are going to get a lot of spaghetti code and low code. The combination of all those triggers are going to cause problems. We see that already. So now we need experts who can look at that and understand, well, we can improve this. There's a better way. And sometimes people ask me, is your answer always Flow? Definitely not. There are use cases that come to me, and then I look at it and I say, this is best done in Apex, right? So we need that understanding, that skill, and that maturity in the ecosystem kind of spread wide, who can support everybody in making better decisions, optimizing the automation on the platform.
Yeah, it certainly seems to me like one of the most accelerative journeys that any Salesforce product has undertaken in as long as I've been in the ecosystem, nearly 6 years now. Flow seems to be the thing that really has taken hold and really accelerated at pace. With that in mind, I don't know if you've had a chance to read them yet, but winter release notes are out now. Is there anything exciting coming towards the end of the year for Flows that you're particularly hyped about?
Yeah, the winter 25 release is, on the surface, it looks like it's a light release for Flow, right? There are many updates that are touching the UI, kind of the usability. These are welcome changes. But there is one substantial change, very important fundamental change and improvement that we see with the transform element that's going to change our lives. And, I've just shared a YouTube video and a blog post about that. And, it's titled How the Transform Element Will Save You Loops. Because, there are some scenarios where we had to use loops. We didn't really want to. But because the collection operations inside Flow were not really as strong as Apex code, we had to go through each record to try and modify some of the values. Now, those things can be handled with the transform element without looping. And that's going to only get better in the coming releases. We are expecting aggregate functions. We are expecting more powerful updates that we can do to collections without looping. So if you've not seen that, I would highly recommend you watch my content, you read my content, you read the release notes, and you familiarize yourself with the transform element, because that's going to change your life in the coming period if you're building quite a bit in the Flow canvas.
Perfect. Andy, thank you so much. For the listeners that are eager to find out more, give us a reminder, where can we find you and your content, and is there anywhere else that you recommend learning some more?
Yeah, well, my domain is called salesforcebreak.com, and you're going to find all the links you need over there. The blog posts are posted over there. There's a link to the YouTube channel. I do run actually a community Slack workspace called the Flownatic workspace. You are going to find the invitation for that Slack workspace in there. I highly recommend you join that Slack workspace. Whenever you hit a hurdle, you cannot build your flows, you can come on there. And there are many people in there that are much more intelligent than me in certain specialized areas that can help you out. As far as the ecosystem goes, obviously the architect.salesforce.com website, the admin blog, Jen's content, automate this, how I built this, those are valuable resources. My fellow MVP, Yumi Ibrahimzadeh, has a platform called Salesforce Time, and he shares very valuable solutions on this platform. But there are many others. Just, as you start going through the content, you are going to find all these related resources that you can leverage. We also frequently write on each other's blogs. We do live sessions together. We collaborate. So, you are going to see who spends a lot of time in the Flow canvas and who can help you out with your challenges.
Perfect. Andy, thank you so much, and hopefully see you at Dreamforce, my friend.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, Jack. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a great one.